Tribes are very, very religious. At one point in time, when I was fiddling in the world of decentralized communities, tribes used to be pretty much the cornerstone. And while doing my own gig, I learned that building a tribe is anything but easy. And today we are going to look at how tribes are built. Hi, everyone. Welcome to Just Crunch It. You must be wondering why I'm talking about tribe. Well, we'll get to our guest in just a bit. I'm your host, Vikram, and Just Crunch It has been curated for anyone who cares about data. Well, the podcast is for you if you are just starting up or you are rethinking how things will evolve with all the latest technological advancements. This is for you if you use data in your day to day or are just thinking about getting started with a career in data, data science, and products. We touch upon the nuances, areas where, in the process of building products and businesses, we end up overemphasizing, areas where we start underlooking or like ignoring things, mistakes that we often make, perspectives, future, and of course, AI, amongst all the things. The goal, honestly, is just to ask some very hard hitting questions about data, business, and everything in between to develop a sense of not actually being left behind as things are changing and evolving around us in this world. Well, today, now onto our guest, we have with us David. David is a co founder and co CEO of Growth Drive. Growth Drive takes upskilling to the next level, and today they have over six country presence. They have trained over 16,000 adults in 900 plus organizations, and it's all about digital upskilling. This is David's third company, for your information, and he has been at it for 9 years now. Previously, he co founded two companies, Twoodo and Blue Lemon Paris, and was also heading growth on both of these fronts. Welcome to the show, David. How are you doing today?
I'm good. Great to see you. Thanks for having me.
This is amazing. So I was just looking at Growth Drive's history, David, and I saw that you say that you have over six campuses in Europe. Has that number changed? That is the best I could find. How big is Growth Drive today?
Yeah, so we've grown, but we've reduced the number of physical campuses. We went fully online 2.5, 3 years ago. Originally, we set out to build academies throughout Europe and even throughout the world because we weren't happy with the level of impact that we could have with online training. And then somehow COVID sort of happened, and the entire world, even older generations, got used to using their screens a lot more and got much more comfortable with remote communications. So we were capable then of having the same impact that we would have in a classroom, but in a purely virtual setting. So then the need for physical campuses sort of diminished, and now we are I think 70 or 80% company, and we now the numbers have changed a bit. We've served 35,000 people, so we've trained 35,000 people across 2 or 3 thousand teams and companies.
Yeah, but your journey in particular makes me very curious. So there are certain people who try a gig for a while, take a break, they maybe start something up of their own. Sometimes they go take a job, they do consulting, they launch funds. This is your third company in a sequence. Can you just give me a general introduction to how your life has evolved? Like, how did Growth Tribe come into being? And why were we talking, or what made you think about an offline campus for that matter? How did that decision change? Like, what does it exactly mean when we say digital upskilling? What are you teaching people also about data science, given that we have a lot of people in the audience who care about data? Just a general overview helps a lot.
No, it's great. I mean, my personal life, it's been a lot of randomness, zero plans, and just sort of chasing opportunities and being extremely curious. I went to China when I was 20 because a buddy of mine was there. I started an import export business over there, sort of randomly. That turned sort of organically into online e-commerce business where I learned to code, digital marketing, data analysis, et cetera, et cetera. And then my wife told me to sell that, made me move to the Netherlands in Amsterdam, where I started a productivity tool because I got an opportunity to do that. And then after that one was Growth Tribe. There was a really nice quote I read the other day. I think it was Jeff Bezos or something. That was like, I think it was something like hate him or love him. It was you can be grinding for 4 years with zero results, and in the fifth year you become the biggest thing on the planet. Right? It's the power of not giving up, and for me, it's a lot of the power of sort of randomness and stirring the pot to get lucky. So I yeah. So I founded Growth Tribe about 9 years ago. So a company called Growth Tribe, And what we do is we have this amazing team, this amazing platform, and we're all passionate about digital skills. Data is being one of those. And what we do now is we boost digital skills within teams and organizations. I think we've trained like 40,000 people now and thousands of teams and companies. And Simon Sinek says start with the why. Our belief is that the best performing people, teams, organizations, companies, they're equipped with skills, capabilities around data, around AI, around digital marketing, product management, things like digital leadership and innovation in general. And there's probably a lot of data experts listening to this
Yeah.
episode. We'd love to absorb some of their brain and some of their capabilities and just stick it into the rest of the organization, essentially. And that's what we try to do. So what we do is we take teams and we put them on, I'm going to call them amazing learning journeys, ones that are fun, relevant, engaging, and actionable, and ones where you can implement the learnings right away. That's a very important thing with what we do at Growth Tribe is we want you to see the ROI of the time that you've invested in learning, not in 6 months, but not tomorrow, but even the very same day. And what we do that's a little bit different is, and what we believe in our learning philosophy is, we offer a mix of on-demand modules. So through our platform, that you can just pick and learn. But where we stand out is we mix that with our experts who can give live sessions and live support if and when needed. And of course, we also offer custom learning journeys to fit a specific team's needs. And we're pretty good at what we do. I think we have a 9.2 satisfaction score across all of our clients at the moment, and we try to deliver positive ROI from the investment that an individual makes or a company makes, which means that they're getting three, four, and we can talk about this a little bit later when we talk about what's the impact of data at scale, for example, but which means they get 4, 5, 6, 7x based on investing in some learnings. I think more than training is we try to equip teams with the necessary tools to increase performance, enhance decision making on almost all KPIs, whether it's customer facing and internal. And just to finish off on the small intro, why we do what we do. And it's painful for me to still see that companies and individuals are still not reaching their full potential
Yeah.
because we could talk about the reasons, the intrinsic reasons or reasons of motivation or sort of structural reasons. We're still neglecting new tech. Now, you're
Mm.
not, I'm maybe not, my team isn't, maybe people listening to this podcast aren't, because just by listening to these podcasts, they're already investing in learning. But I would say it's about the 95% across the board. And that's a number that's been studied actually. So you've got your top performers within orgs, and then about 95% that are still neglecting new technologies and the skills needed to use them. Maybe not at the cool, fancy startups, scale ups, or tech companies, but within the rest of the economy, it's completely the case. It's also the second why is that we believe existing learning solutions, you know, they're not up to date, they're not engaging enough, they're too short term focused, and they lack a complete lack of focus on application. We think training has a really bad name. On average in Europe, I don't have the stats for the States or for Asia or for other continents, but in Europe, only 1% of the average work week is spent on actual deliberate learning. So very little. And also, training has a very bad name because 80% of training is compliance training. So it's associated with sort of boring, I have to do this training type things. And finally, is we try to enable change through learning and help people. Sounds a bit corny, but achieve their full potential through this continuous upskilling in digital skills. Because we are now in the era of human capital and in the era of lifelong learning. It's just growing so fast and changing so fast. It's a continuous lifelong process.
Wow. Wow. I like so it while you were saying all this, like first of all, I remembered that the number that I knew about how many people have been trained by Growth Tribe was like far, far, far below. And I did that in the introduction. So of course, for everyone listening, the number is above 40,000, which is phenomenal. But David, you mentioned a satisfaction score of 9 plus. And I'm wondering, like, when you were talking about how 95% of the people are not really keeping themselves up to date on whatever is going to happen in future and upskilling with that lens, I just got reminded of how privileged I am, because in my previous company, not the previous one, but in my first company, in the first job that I had an amazing leader, an amazing boss, or like boss of boss. And there was this whole culture of learning Fridays. So the entire second half of Friday, if you choose to be in office and not go out, you could pick on any particular subject of your interest, whether it's related to the business or not. All you are supposed to do is actively actually learn. If you're sitting on a laptop in an office, you have to be learning, because they would like do these round checks. And that changed a lot of things for a lot of people. Like, I was anyway in the habit, like, I'm someone who has over 100 newsletters hitting my inbox every morning, and I keep myself, I try keeping myself up to date with as many things as possible. But I could see the difference that that policy was creating in lives of like a lot of my peers. And then on that note, when you mentioned that 95% of these people are not doing it, I'm sure there are people at Growth Drive who probably had no background. They came and joined your org, went through the curriculum, and it changed their life. Maybe they got the job that they would have never gotten. So when you mentioned that 9.2 score satisfaction, I was just thinking, is there a satisfaction score of how David feels like on 1 to 10 in terms of whatever you are doing? Are you like, have there been stories about people who have like absolutely changed their lives because they went through something? I just want to create some more awareness.
Yeah, so it's difficult to mention them all, but of course we're in the game of career change a little bit, and we have a little channel on our Slack that's called Impact and Wins, and we get these daily. Whether it's somebody feeling like their work is more purposeful, or somebody's career who's been impacted, or an entire department who's just completely nailed their KPIs. This is something that happens almost daily because, as I like to say, you know, knowledge. We live in a knowledge economy, right? So there is no greater power than knowledge. Knowledge leads to technological power,
Yeah.
which leads to economic power, which in the current state of affairs leads to geopolitical power, typically. But that's also at the individual level, right? Whether we're talking about nations, organizations, or individuals, it all sort of coincides. And in short, I believe investing in knowledge is the greatest and highest ROI investment that we can make as humans, as professionals, as teams, organizations. By the way, it works very much like a compound interest rate. So knowledge compounds over time, also to grow exponentially. So again, knowledge, and specifically digital knowledge, just data analytics, digital marketing, digital leadership, UX, Gen AI, investing in those capabilities are the greatest investments we can make. Taking the time to learn deliberately. I'm so happy you talk about time allocation. And that's usually the issue, is lack of time. Um, and also the a notion of deliberate learning. So there's two types of learning. You have deliberate learning and incidental learning. Deliberate learning is learning that has specific time allocated, clear goal, and also a clear path, and that's quite challenging, as opposed to what's called incidental learning, which is basically learning on the job, or learning as you go. And so that all of those newsletters that you're getting in your inbox, that's a bit more incidental learning. So
Yeah.
it's sort of learning randomly, whereas deliberate learning is the type of learning when you want to learn a new language or when you want to learn a new skill. And those are typically more challenging. And those are the ones that typically help you expand your cognitive bandwidth by learning something, what we call new, let's say, or that's a bit more challenging. And we do a lot of on the job learning, right? We do a lot of incidental learning. We do a lot less of that deliberate learning with a very clear, specific goal. So the fundamental thing that you talked about was leadership. And what we see is that we've studied this a lot, we've written about it, is that even though the greatest investment we can make in a knowledge economy is knowledge, it's also one of the activities that we tend to put off the most. And that's for three main reasons. There's a bunch of other reasons, but the three main ones that I like to talk about
Yeah.
is, the first one is short-termism. We have this cognitive bias, in our brains, cognitive bias, that leads to, they call it temporal discounting, where we're going to discount things that have a longer term return on investment. It's also why, climate change is such an issue, right? It's like the slowly boiling frog. It doesn't feel like it's being boiled in the water. And so short termism, how do you fix that? We've tried to fix it by creating these actionable, engaging learning pathways and formats where you can start applying your learning right away. It's like spending a bit of time learning a language, and then you can use it the very next hour at the restaurant, for example. So you need to feel the ROI right away, or else you feel like you're losing your time. And the formats also need to be extremely sort of engaging, actionable. Typically in data teams, we're quite blue, so we don't have as much of that ADHD, that TikTok generation, but all the other departments in the organization seem to have it, let's say. And then the second one was the problem with the stigma of boring trainings. That typically we associate training with compliance and being trained on the tools that we're supposed to be using, et cetera, et cetera. But the third one that you mentioned is about that leader that gave you time. It's really this lack of time. And we believe it's the organizations and it's the leaders' role to allocate time specifically for learning, that it shouldn't happen in the evenings or in the mornings. We have busy lives, we have kids, we have sports, et cetera, et cetera. And that time should be allocated within the organization. And so we only work with leaders and with organizations and teams who are willing to put in the time and help convince them to build and transform their teams and businesses into learning organizations. And if that mindset from the leadership isn't there, we just don't even work with the teams and organizations. So if you're in an organization where that leader isn't there to allocate that time, or if there's not a training budget, then it'll be on your own time, or maybe rethink a little bit the choices you made in terms of the team or the team or the organization that you're in. That time allocation is so important. Sure, there's also lack of budget, lack of what should I learn next, lack of alignment between KPIs and learning, but the time is usually the number one blocker, and that has to do with mindset of the leadership within that org.
Wow, all of this again like circles back to privilege, because I realize as you're speaking, everything is correct. Everything is so structured, except that I never see that structure in the process of my learning, because I'm maybe just around people and in such situations and circumstances where that provision has been there for me, where I can go and then like create time for myself. There's no budget constraint, there's nothing, like there has been someone who's supporting me. But talking on learning, David, this is a very 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 close topic to my heart. I remember when I was interviewing in my very early days for like as in the first few interviews that I had when I went to hire someone, and we had these college campus interviews. So we would go to college campuses, these interviews would continue the whole night pretty much, because we were like in a decent company and people would want, like people, a lot of people would want to come in. So even if you try ruling them out, you shortlist about 8 to 10 good students, you chat with them over the night, give them some assignments, you just like keep stress testing them 3 4 rounds back to back, and then you see who is like got the right mentality and so on. It was a little much of like a very hard process to sort of go through. But the topic that was the most important for us, and most of the students would not have realized as back then, was how do you as a person learn. And lately I have been thinking about it so much. When I was, so Sam Altman, there's been this whole discussion on what he went and did. Like he went and addressed the latest batch of YC companies, and though that talk itself is not public, there are like these snippets coming out of what he mentioned. And one of the statements there was that AGI, which is like the general intelligence that we talk about, artificial general intelligence or super AGI for that matter, that's that not very far. I don't know if that's actually going to happen anytime soon, but there's a podcast that he also had with Bill Gates where he's talking about all of these shortcomings that we may experience with the current age LLMs getting fixed to a large extent, which just means that everyone who is even working on AI today, who's familiarizing themselves with AI, is going to get more and more challenged. So, because we were talking about learning, of course, we'll know things when whatever version of AI we are talking about becomes live. But how are you personally approaching the future today? And what would you tell to the people who are wondering about how they can best prepare for that future?
Yeah, it's a good one. It's a tough one. Like, what do I know, right? And I think you talked a little bit about the future. I really like that William Gibson quote. The future is now. It's just not evenly distributed. So it's already happening. I also don't want to look into the future too much because there's already so much possible today with the current tools, and we're not even using them to half of their potential. With the regards to the discussion around, so maybe it's good just to sort of put the mental model. There's three types of AI, if I understand correctly. You've got ANI, AGI, ASI. Artificial narrow intelligence. It's when an AI can do one thing a million times better than a human, a million times better at playing chess, for example. And then you've got AGI, artificial general intelligence, when they've reached the human level of intelligence. And then a SI, which is artificial superintelligence, which is the AI overlords and end of the world, et cetera, et cetera. And also, by the way, if I understand correctly, the moment you reach AGI, the exponential curve of growth and development is so fast that you reach ASI very, very rapidly afterwards. So that's why we're also scared of AGI, artificial general intelligence. Now, whereas I do believe that to some extent we've reached AGI in the sense that the AI is already good at a lot of things, better than humans in a lot of things, reading, writing, analyzing, passing tests, etc., etc. And if I also understand correctly, the last consensual estimations believe that we'll have this AGI ASI within the next 50 years. I also really like Jan LeCun's point of view, who for me is far more credible in the field, and he's expressed his skepticism around AGI. So he was the head of AI over at Meta, who have released Llama's open source model, and he's also quite skeptical about the current state of quantum computing. But then again, he's French like me, and we tend to be overly skeptical people, and then things happen a lot faster than we expect. Um, Whatever ANI or AGI bring to the field of learning specifically, I think the blockers with humans will stay the same. The ones I was mentioning before: short-termism, lack of time, stigma around learning being boring. Now, having said all of that, AI is a beautiful tool. At least for us at Growth Tribe internally, and for the clients that we train, we see it being used now daily to improve every facet of the organization: content creation, adaptive learning, optimized customer journeys, client communications, internal operation optimization, or just as a simple thinking tool. This tool is already so powerful. I do think there's two types of people and organizations: people in organizations who use this powerful new tech, and those who don't. I don't know if I'll compare this to the discovery of fire, Prometheus, etc. But I think we're getting close. Look at this stuff. It's a life, business, economics, literary, everything coach that's always there, always happy to help, can be whoever you want it to be. And it's basically free. It's cheaper than electricity at this point. And companies, their leaders, their contributors are waking up to this and investing, or at least trying to. And whoever is listening to this should too, or should convince their leadership to start using it. I mean, just for people who are just getting started in the field, again, it's not you, it's not me, it's probably not people listening to this, but we are not our target audience. I would always advise to play around with this stuff as soon as possible, to bookmark ChatGPT, Microsoft Copilot, Perplexity AI, Claude AI, Anthropic. Just bookmark it into their browser and to use it for every single business task they have for 1 week. And that's already training enough, and their mind will just explode, and they will already be in the, I don't know, in the top percentile. Um, I think where it gets really, really exciting, and I'm kind of a techno optimist, is that the democratization of knowledge and expertise. That's the number one for me. Is I'm an expert in the digestive system now. Expert I can be, because I can, have access to one that's never tired and always understands and that's always available and speaks to me in a female voice, and if I want, or a male voice if I don't want. I never really understood the digestive system. I was always faking it all of these years. And then I took a 3-hour back and forth course while I was driving the other day. And now, like, I have access to an expert, and AI is breaking down the traditional barriers to information. Imagine how
Yeah.
powerful that is. Now, the problem is, you were talking about privilege, is that only a small portion of us are going to use that for self development, right? All of us geeks and knowledge lovers, most people will just either sort of not use it or use it for something much more maybe futile, let's say. And it's not just about having access to information anymore, but about understanding and applying it in real time. Unbelievable. All of the knowledge of the world that's ever been accumulated, maybe not all of it, but a very large portion of it um, available all day, every day. And AI tools are becoming like personal assistants that can enhance our learning and decision making processes. And then there's also this concept of personalized learning, the one size fits all model in education. It's becoming obsolete. This AI is enabling hyper personalized learning paths, adapting to individual learning styles and paces, which is revolutionary in the field of education. I still think we need to convince people to spend time on learning. That'll still be around in 5, 10 years. But the learning journeys are so much more powerful. And last one, I would say maybe two more is another area I find fascinating is the enhancement of creativity and innovation. It's not
Yeah.
just there to replace human creativity, it's there to augment it. I have a bunch of friends who are sort of photographers and artists and who are using it to augment. So, of course, you've got the Luddites that are like, this isn't real art and this isn't real creativity. But say that to all the photographers using digital photography as opposed to analog photography, right? And it's here to augment human creativity. Imagine leveraging AI to explore new creative boundaries in design, art, even literature. It's like having a muse that's simultaneously a library of all of the world's art and a
Yeah.
workshop of tools at your disposal. Unbelievable. Sky's the limit. What do you do with all these possibilities? And then from a business point of view, that's fine. And from an artistic point of view, and there's also the role of AI in solving complex global challenges, climate change, healthcare. Provides us with these tools to analyze vast amounts of data, predict scenarios, come up with the solutions that are beyond human capacity to process. So again, I'm a techno optimist. I think we will use these tools to solve some of the world's problems, and that we need to, and that it's not for nothing that serendipitous that this amazing new capability is coming out at the same moment where uh, issues of climate change seem to be, more urgent than ever before. I
I,
somehow, maybe I'm too much of an optimist, but I think there's,
no,
these two things are happening at the same time for a reason.
I love it. So I'm just thinking about it, and I have a very, very personal question. It looks like you have always planned things. Maybe if even if you have not planned things, there's always been a very well defined route, or you have thought about things deeply. Not everyone is thinking about digestive system, and I'm sure there is a reason to why you'd spend 3 hours learning that. Or for that matter, when you were talking about AGI, not everyone would start that, okay, hey, here is how I understand it. There are like three categories of it. And I have asked this question to quite a few people who have come on this show before. So it shows that you care about topics, or at least you go deep into them. Now that brings me to your career. It looks like you have been pretty much the head of a company, head of a growth twice. And on top, that designation may be nothing because you were the co founder as well in all the three roles. Is that part of why and how you have evolved? Or would you say that because you have been thinking about it in a certain way, is there an asset to how and why you have been able to do whatever you have been able to do? How are you keeping yourself on top of everything?
Yeah. So just start off by saying that I don't find myself particularly successful in any way,
Sure.
shape, or form, and I shouldn't. I'm not a model for anyone. Definitely not. I think the definition of success is: am I happy to wake up in the morning? And even if I'm not, can I use that not being happy to wake up in the morning to grow in any case and to help others? From a professional point of view, I'm one of those generalists that maybe it's because I get bored quite easily or I like to jump from topic to topic. I really look up to completer finishers, people who are capable of starting something and then finishing and working out the details and making it perfect. Whether it's an artisan, those artisans in Japan, for example, that work with wood, or even I look up to my father for that. He's capable of building a house from scratch or fixing an engine from scratch and having the patience to really finish it. That's definitely not me. I'm much more of a tinkerer. I like to tinker. And I'm trying to convince myself that generalists thrive in a specialized world that's always changing, because there is a risk to over specialization. So, my father, for example, I keep talking about my dad, but he's able to specialize himself in very, very many areas. But most people, they tend to specialize themselves in one area, right, and go very, very, very deep. And I see that that requires a certain type of personality that most of us don't have. Again, I call them completer finishers. For many, many roles, and for many of us, it's better to play the role of the generalist. And I see that organizations that have a lot of generalists also seem to adapt better or adapt faster. And we're no longer in a job or function based world, we're more in a skills based world, the skills based organization. So again, generalists seem to thrive in a specialized world. It's funny if you look at, this was from the book Range by David Epstein. If you look at most Nobel Prize winners, also had a side gig or side passions. They were interested in a lot of other things on the side, and they were able to find the commonalities the weak ties in a network. At Growth Tribe, we've often evangelized and developed. I probably built that as I was building the company, and the notion of the T-shaped player, the T-shaped individual. I like that mental model. So the idea of the T-shape is you have one or two areas of specialization where you dive deep, where you're really a specialist and an expert in, but also a very broad range of skills and capabilities that allow you to adapt and shift rapidly. And this is typically the entrepreneurial profile, but you see that it's also the product manager profile, the project
Yeah.
manager profile, it's the manager profile within organization, the CIO profile. It's a lot of profiles within the organization where you just need to know what the other departments and what the others are talking about. So you need this mix of the data, of the art, of the creativity, of the communication, the stakeholder management, the analytics. It's basically a mix of, at least for me personally, it's always been a mix of tech and code with analytics and data, with creativity, with and then with the whole soft cognitive side, whether on the client side, so understanding the human brain and the cognitive sciences, or understanding people within the org. Like something like stakeholder management is maybe one of the most important skills to have within organizations, and communication, adaptive communication. So it's almost like trying to be the hacker, the hustler, and the hipster all at the same time. And maybe you're not the world's best hacker or the world's best hustler or the world's best hipster, but you're in the top 25% of three of those, and you can combine them. And that makes you unbeatable.
Yeah.
There was that Tim Ferriss thing. One day he said, you shouldn't try to be in the top 1% of any field, but maybe try to be in the top 25% of two fields, combine them, and you become unique because you're the only one who can combine those. Like you, for example, seems that you're really strong on the data side and really strong on personal branding and on communication. Wow, you can really stand out thanks to those three. So it's that combination, and that's something that's always sort of followed me, and also thanks to just this overwhelming curiosity about the world.
Yeah.
And then yeah.
I love how you have so apt references for almost everything. Like you're referring to things left, right, and center, and most of it I'm familiar with, which is why I can totally see how you have approached your life. David, we just talked about entrepreneurial spirit, right? Like, and then we were just talking about the hustle mentality and then the T-shaped leader. I know a lot of people in our audience are folks who are trying to build something, right? Like, and maybe a lot of people, even at Growth Drive, are people who have eventually realized or may always had that realization that they want to start something of their own. Now, we were just now talking about AGI and super intelligence and whatnot, but today, even with that generalist mindset, let's say you have that T-shaped thing in you and you're trying to start as an entrepreneur, I have two questions for you. So the first one is, in general, because you have held positions where I'm sure you are evaluating products, there are people pitching you left, right, and center. There are maybe even in your previous role as the head of growth, maybe people don't come to a co-founder, but to a head of growth, there are very many more pitches. And what I'm essentially coming to is that for someone who is trying to actually go and, let's say, build a product that helps someone down the stream, right? Like where the buyer is not the same person as the person who is using the product, most of the founders end up making the mistake of how do we go about positioning it, or how do we navigate that. Now, why am I even asking this question? The second part of my question is, as we are talking about a world where the variables are changing every time, there may be a new piece of technology. As ChatGPT came in, a lot of things that got started in 2018, 19, 20, 21 became irrelevant suddenly, because it was so easy to do it on your own. And today, these companies are struggling. They are going left, right, and center. They're trying to pivot. Some of them have been acquired. Whatever will happen in future, that time will tell. But for someone who's thinking of starting out today, even with that generalist mindset, they have to navigate two levels. One is, what do I build that's going to stay relevant with time? And the second is, how do I actually go and navigate that barrier of my user being very different from who my decision maker is? Maybe I'm building a tool for an analyst. The decision maker is, let's say, the head of data or the head of revenue or something like that. What do you have to say about that? What would you recommend people to think
Okay,
about?
I'll have a long answer for the first one, really short answer for the second one. So the first one is, if anybody's data driven and thinking about entrepreneurship, they probably shouldn't, because from a probabilistic point of view, the chance of succeeding is, I think that 99% or 90% of all startups fail was a bit BS, but it's close to that. It's very close to that. So everything in life is probabilistic thinking, right? It's risk reward. What's the risk of crossing the road? The reward is I'll make it to the other side. The probability of me succeeding is very high. With entrepreneurship or even starting project within a larger organization, this chance of success is extremely low. So if you look at FMCG companies, we never talk about all of the products in the aisles that didn't make it. But I think it's very similar to 9 out of 10 products actually never make it and they get shut down. I think it was about 80% of projects fail within larger organizations, whether internal or customer facing. Startups, it's the same thing, startup scale ups, and new value propositions within organizations. So if you're a probabilistic person and you want to mitigate risk, don't do it because it will not work most of the time. Now, having said that, it's really about the journey, right? It's about having fun. And entrepreneurship is a very painful. It's a very painful journey. It's also extremely rewarding. The lows are very low. The highs are extremely high. So you sort of get addicted to it. But most of the time, it doesn't work out. So that's the disclaimer. If you still want to go into it, I would say that you were asking me, what do I build? I think it's not so much what do I build, it's rather what pain do I address? What pain am I trying to solve? And if you want to reduce the risk, so some people say that the timing is more important than the size of the market, which is more important than the product you're actually building, which is more important than the team. I think it's in that direction. But it really has to do with what pain am I solving and how long will that pain exist and how resistant is that pain to change. So a really nice mental model to use when you're ideating and when you want to build something, it's a mix of two. The first one is the experiment based approach. I think that you shouldn't rely on gut too much, and if you do, you should try to test your gut feeling as fast as possible. Now, you mix that with what are the riskiest assumptions when you're trying to build something. So, in the world of building products or tools for a customer, there's four types of risks, four families of risk. There's desirability, there's feasibility, there's viability, and then there's what we call strategic fit. And those are by order of how important they are for you to validate, or how risky they are, or how likely they are to crush your business. So the first one is desirability. What pain am I solving? Is the pain worth solving? Will people pay to solve that pain? Are they already solving it? Are they willing to switch from how they're currently solving it? Are they hacking it with a solution and they're fine with that solution? Or will they actually be willing to pay in money and in time to solve it with your solution? That's typically the most important one to solve. Desirability. Do they have the pain? Do they know they have the pain? If they don't know they have the pain, it's going to cost you a lot to educate the market and convince them to have the pain. So do they know they have the pain? Are they willing to pay to solve the pain? Are they willing to switch from how they're currently solving it to your solution? Yeah, and is the market big enough? Do
Yeah.
enough people have the pain? That's sort of the first one. Whatever you're doing, start validating that one as soon as possible. And usually we say to try to don't build, but sell first, then build. Try to sell it through prototyping, which can be as simple as I'm going to reach out to 100 people with a pitch of what I'm selling. And without even showing them the solution, I'm going to ask them to pay for an early access to it with a 50% discount if they pay right now. And if I can't even get people to pick up the phone or anybody to say, yeah, they're willing to pay or actually pay, it probably means that the pain that I'm solving isn't big enough. Now, this doesn't apply to deep tech. It doesn't apply to building nuclear reactors, but it does apply. None of this applies, by the way, to building nuclear reactors. It's actually the opposite. But it does apply to sort of 90% of business ideas or 80%. I have to stop using these hyperbole percentages, but to most use cases. Then the second one is feasibility. Can this actually be done? Can this be done now? Do I have the capacity to do this? Can I find the right people to do it? Can I find the funding to do it? So can we actually deliver this? Is it actually possible to deliver? The third one is viability. So that's business model. Can I build a business model where this becomes viable? And the last one is strategic fit. And that's usually, even though it's the least risky one, it's the one you can really have a lot of control over and think about, does this fit me? We talk about founder product fit or founder
Yes.
market fit. Does it fit my personality, who I am as a person, who I want to be? So does this fit me? And I would say focus on desirability. There's a beautiful book called, it's from Strategizer. The editor is Wiley. I think it's called Design Better Businesses, Design a Better Business. It takes you through every single step of how to validate business ideas, step to step, step by step. You can also use it internally. We also have courses at Growth Tribe around this, rapid experimentation, validating assumptions, et cetera, et cetera. So that's how I would approach it if I was, when I'll start again, or if I was starting again today with this very methodical and run as many experiments as possible, as rapidly as possible. I love the notion of anti-fragility by Nassim
Yeah,
Taleb.
Taleb.
Yeah,
Yes.
the notion that systems benefit from stressors and anti-fragile people, teams, ideas are the ones that grow stronger from stressors. So submit your ideas, your business ideas, your projects to as many stressors as possible, to as many experiments as possible to see if they make it, and also they'll just grow stronger. The beautiful thing today is there is no excuse not to get your product or your idea out there to get feedback loops. You can get feedback loops so much more rapidly than maybe 20, 30, or 40 years ago. So yeah, that's kind of and the idea from Taleb is that the cost of many, it's how venture capital portfolios work. So the cost of many failed attempts or experiments is kind of low, but it's greatly outweighed by the positive results of one successful experiment. So the one successful experiment in your portfolio, 10x pays back for all of the failed ones. So just start doing it, get it out there, and start stress testing it.
Start doing it. Okay. David, we are almost running the end of our time, but you just mentioned starting up again in a very different context. But let's say I take Growth Drive away from you today, and there is like a whole bunch of technological shift happening. So, on a closing note, what are you most excited about? If you had to try something out, where would you do it? And in general, because you have spent so much of time building companies, teaching people, figuring out these patterns, observing things, is there in general a learning that you would like to give to our audience?
Oh, a learning I don't know. I think that I'd probably start an education company again because it's like if when you're not a good violin player, you become a violin teacher. So because I'm not really great at anything, I feel like I have to build an education company, probably to scratch my own itch so I can keep learning. I find the space of clean tech really interesting as well. Agri-tech and clean tech, I find that absolutely fantastic. That's also why we try to train a lot of the companies that are in that field or as many as possible. And then if I could leave people with just a tip, it's just yeah, spend your time wisely. Basically, try to spend it
Okay.
as wisely as possible. Force yourself to do the stuff that's kind of annoying and hard, because the hard stuff makes you so much happier once it's done. And then once that's done, that hard stuff, go spend time with the family and the friends to enjoy life a little bit. But try to do the hard stuff up front, right? Not
Yes.
the easy stuff, the hard, deep work in the morning that's hard, that's uncomfortable, that's analytical. Really, that notion of that high ROI activities. I love that book by Cal Newport. That'll be the tip. There's a book by Cal Newport. It's called Deep Work. Deep, uninterrupted, passionate work that's hard, that's complicated. Like, ask yourself, how much deep work do I do on a weekly basis? And can I maybe reserve like at least 4 8 hours a week for that deep work, non-interrupted on something difficult that I'll have high lifetime value, like learning, like working on a beautiful new product, like working on a beautiful piece of content, something like that. Focus on the deep work, the shallow work. You do it all day, every day. That stuff is easy.
Yeah, I've read that one and it's so interesting. Like, even people like Bill Gates, they take out 15 days out of their time, go into like a jungle where no one is going to disturb them, only to focus exclusively on deep work. And I would agree, like, do the hard stuff. I love that as an advice. David, where can someone reach out to you if they wanted to? I'll of course drop all the links to everything you have mentioned in the description, but anyway, where can someone reach out to you?
Yeah, so two places. If you want to upskill your team in the latest digital skills and get some ROI as rapidly as possible at a price that's really a good bang for your buck, you go to www.growthtribe.io, growthtribe.io. And then for me personally, I always like to interact with people on LinkedIn. It's kind of where I hang out the most. I do pretty good on Twitter, but I prefer LinkedIn. It's much better for the messaging, et cetera, et cetera. So you just check me out, David Arnoux, Arnoux, on LinkedIn. Connect with me, and then we can keep the conversation going over there.
Awesome. David, this was a pleasure having you here. I hope you enjoyed the chat as well. Thank you so much for taking the time out.
Thanks a lot, Vikram.